All right, Out of Turn 4 is back here on Tinkle Sports after a long 2 weeks off. And of course, you may notice. Oh, hang on. There we go. Now I got it. So we added a flag in the background now. Of course, this show is on hiatus due to the Olympics. But let's not waste any time getting right into it. Let's start off with the IndyCar Series. Now, the reason we're kind of rushing in, so today we're going to talk IndyCar and NASCAR for the past weekend. We're not going to talk any silly season because I don't know how long this is going to take. And we've only got, well, it'll be 29 minutes to get this show going. So let's get started. Let's start with the IndyCar at Nashville. Of course, Marcus Ericsson, he went airborne early in the race, and he proceeded to win the race on Sunday. And of course, keep in mind he served penalties as well for avoidable contact, which of course ended the day of Sebastian Bourdais. There were a lot of red flags, a lot of big wrecks in that race, which caused the race. Of course, keep in mind it started at 4:30 their time, 5:30 Eastern time here. That race did not end until after sunset, basically. So they almost ran into the night. 33 out of the 80 laps were spent under the caution. That's almost 50% of the race. And of course, the red flags as well. My general thoughts here, of course, I'm not going to talk much about the darkness. I'll give my overall thoughts on that at a later date, but I will or a later time in the show. Sticking on topic though with the race, I'm not a fan. Let me put it that way. I'm not a fan of this Nashville street course. Even more disappointing, it's great that IndyCar had 27 drivers in this race. However, this track is very narrow. There's really not much room for racing from everything I've seen. So really, in hindsight, was this a good decision to race there? Probably not. But unfortunately, I don't think IndyCar will look at it that way. They're going to look at it as a success because look at how many people were in those stands. It was remarkable. I saw the end of the thing on tape, of course. Keep in mind, I was driving home from another race at Watkins Glen, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But generally, I was very dissatisfied with this race. I was listening to it on the radio in the car, and it just was no good. It was a bad race, let's put it that way. This is the kind of race you would want probably if you were a NASCAR fan. Sorry. Contact in IndyCar races, wrecks in IndyCar races, they're not impressive, okay? They're not fun to watch. Okay, any fan that thinks that watching wrecks in IndyCar is fun and watching a wreck fest in IndyCar is fun, I think you've got the wrong sport. Plain simple. You're not watching it for the same reason that the rest of us are watching it. That was a joke. And I don't think there's anything IndyCar can do to defend how that racing was throughout the race. Maybe they should have had, in a way, a knockout qualifying session and said, we're only going to keep 22 in the field. Maybe that would have limited some of the issues that we had in that race. Of all things to run at Nashville, why wasn't it Nashville Super Speedway? That's my biggest question. It's very clear that the Nashville fan base is there and it's present. But a street course, it took a giant F, in my opinion. I wish there was a letter below an F, because that's what they really deserve for how bad that racing was. I got messages the whole way home saying how bad that racing was. My brother and my friend Austin there had to read the text because they were all in Discord, and my dad texted my brother and I about it, If they were dissatisfied, and based on everything I've heard on IndyCar Radio Network, I was very dissatisfied. So, needless to say, I hope that once this deal ends, as much as it pains me to say it, tell them we'll run at Nashville Super Speedway. But if you're not willing to do that, then we're not willing to run in Nashville anymore because it's not safe. And to add to it, keep in mind, we don't run at Pocono for safety reasons, quote unquote. And of course, yes, we have the aero screen, but let's put it this way. Pocono never put on, and this is salty, Brian, coming in because keep in mind, I used to go to the Pocono race every year. So for me to see that get cut from the schedule was very upsetting. But, you know, Pocono had 2 wrecks early on, generally, and then the rest of the race was green, and we didn't have any issues. Granted, the wrecks there were more deadly, but this was before the aero screen. You can't blame IndyCar now with the aero screen because in a way, we've gotten through 2 Indy 500s. We got through a very serious crash with Jimmy Johnson this weekend, and glad he's okay. We got through Marcus Ericsson going basically, he could have 180'd that. Okay? And if he 180'd it, he wasn't coming out in good shape. You know, enough can be said about the safety of the car that they don't have an excuse to run, that they don't have to run another 2-mile or larger track, and they should. They should run at least 2 of them. But again, when you go to a track that's a wreck fest, I mean, and this brings me back to New Hampshire the last time IndyCar ran there as well. That was a shit show, okay, at the end. If I recall correctly, the end of that race was a shit show. And it was a massive wreck on the front stretch. You know, but plain and simply, if you're going to kill off tracks because of that, you know, then I'm expecting Nashville to be on that list in a few years of tracks that are killed off. I'm sorry to those who were at Nashville who might have enjoyed it, but honestly, from what I've seen, it was a disappointing race. It was a huge letdown, to say the least, for in my opinion, for many IndyCar fans, it was a letdown. You can let me know below if I'm wrong, but that's just my view. Now on to the big part of this, and this may take up the rest of the show, quite frankly. I hope we have time to get picks in for the Indy-NASCAR doubleheader, but we'll see. I'm going to try to ramble through this quick. Austin Hill, he won the weather-shortened truck race, and of course, that truck race, the first one at Watkins Glen in 21 years, long overdue, I should say. Very, very long overdue. That race was pretty good, honestly. I kind of figured lap 1, turn 1 was going to be a bit of an issue because there was no practice. So, I think we got what we expected out of that. But the rest of the race went well, honestly. It went very, very well. I was very impressed with how the trucks were running there. And needless to say, I hope they return. Because, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed they ended the race early. I was very upset in the moment. But with 11 to go and the race restarting at 3:30, with the Xfinity Series having to start at 4, NASCAR probably thought, hey, what happens if we have a wreck in the Xfinity Series or we have a rain delay? Now we got to push this race back. We got to push the start time back. Especially if there's lightning in the area, because that's a 30-minute red flag right there. So my guess is they just thought here, we can't have another 30-minute red flag condition because it's going to put us in a bit of an issue with darkness on the way. So I guess I can applaud IndyCar or NASCAR for one thing, is that they ended the truck race looking back at it, but in the moment that was kind of disappointing, and I hate to see the playoffs determined on a rain delay or lightning delay that ended the race. I hate to see that. But, you know, again, looking at it, NASCAR probably made the right call to end the race right there. Now, the playoffs were set, but I'm going to tell you my favorite so far is the guy who won the truck race, Austin Hill. I think he's really starting to get it together in his second season at Hattori Racing, and I think he's got a shot at the title. Toyota kept up their dominance, though, in the NASCAR Xfinity race at Watkins Glen. Ty Gibbs picked up his third career win and his 10th career start, should I note. He passed AJ Allmendinger late. AJ got the lead on the final restart, ran away for a bit. Then he came, and then Ty Gibbs got it together late, came back, passed him for the lead. That was disappointing, man. I was a little upset about that win, but, you know, we were rooting hard. Let me put it this way. Me, my friends, the people around us at the track, we were all rooting hard for AJ Allmendinger. It was so disappointing to see him lose that. At least I think we were. There were a few Ty Gibbs fans around us, but I think everybody in our section enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It was probably, the Xfinity race was probably the best race all weekend. I think I can make that safe argument that the Xfinity Series was the best race all weekend. It was close racing. It was aggressive. You know, it was just really, really good, honestly. And it's something I wish the Cup Series was. But with that, let's actually talk about the Cup Series now. And actually, wow, we're making good timing. But the Cup Series ran at Watkins Glen as well. Chase Elliott entered here. Keep in mind, the winner of the last two. Hence why he's got the Road Course King crown there. And this race, I think, proved no different. But he had an obstacle. And that obstacle was he had to go to the rear, which is per usual this season because it appears that this team can't get this car through inspection properly. And if it's not that, it's unapproved adjustments. It's always something that sends this 9 car to the rear. And that's very upsetting to see. You know, I was pretty upset about that. But again, he made his way forward, played a little strategy. Again, he didn't have Alan Gustafson for the race, so he had to work around that. Christopher Bell didn't have his crew chief, Adam Stevens, either. And then Kyle Busch, Martin Truex did not have their pit crews. They were in contact with someone who had COVID or something along those lines. So they got sent home. So there you go, 4 players in this race. I'm going to include Christopher Bell because he won the Daytona Road Course. But there were 4 players in this race that were probably the top favorites. Of course, the Penske guys were the favorites. Beavis and Butthead took each other out, and by that I mean Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano. Of course, Keselowski spun late in the first stage. Then Logano, Keselowski get together in stage 2. Basically spin out right there. That basically put a nail in the coffin for both of their chances of winning because Truex won stage 2. Then it was mainly Truex and Christopher Bell for the longest time. We came to final pit stops. Kyle Larson got the better of him, and he goes away with the race lead. And from there, Kyle Larson pulled away. Chase Elliott, of course, pitted 10 laps before them, had 10 laps better gas mileage, and was going to make it on fuel with one more stop. Whereas Kyle Larson, Martin Truex pitted with about 34, 33 to go, so they were flirting with disaster. Thankfully, they both made it. But of course, they were flirting with disaster. The whole third stage, I'm not going to lie, for Watkins Glen standards, it was not the best final stage. Let's put it that way. It was not really close racing. really no cautions that whole stage. It was all green. You know, I told my friends, I mean, they were Kyle Larson fans, mind you, and they even agreed. They said it was kind of a quiet Watkins Glen race. It wasn't what we normally expect. And keep in mind, Austin, who's not here today on this show, but he goes to the Glen every year, and this is actually how I got invited to go. But he used to go every year. This was actually his 10th race at Watkins Glen. So for him to say that it was kind of a dull final stage there, I'll take his word on it. And of course, based on my viewing, it was kind of as well. But Kyle Larson would go on to win the race. Chase Elliott would rebound to second, and again, starting 37th, crawling through the field. Really no cautions to help him out other than the stage end. I believe a wreck in stage 2 caused a caution. A wreck in stage 1 caused a caution. So there were 2 or 3 cautions that weren't caused by stage end. So that said, you know, for him to rebound to get second through strategy, if he's not the road course king in your eyes, he better be after this one. And if he's not, then you haven't been watching. It's that simple. He's been lights out this season and really the last few years on road courses. He may not have the wins to back it up, and, you know, again, 4 laps, 3 laps to go. He really, I mean, even when he got by Truex, he really didn't have a shot of getting to Kyle Larson. I said he had to make quick work of him. I said in the stands, he's going to have to make quick work of Truex, and he's going to have to really hope Kyle Larson gets battered in some lap traffic. He got battered in some lap traffic. However, he kept going, and, it just didn't work out in Chase's favor today. No way, shape, or form did it work out in his favor today. Kyle Larson earned that win, but I think it doesn't take away from the fact that Chase Elliott is, in fact, the road course king at the end of the day. And again, a very dull stage 3, to say the least. So that's just my opinion, but I will tell you, the atmosphere was phenomenal. It was absolutely everything I expected it to be. And just a little personal note before we move on. Watkins Glen has always been a dream for me to attend a NASCAR race. Since I started watching NASCAR, probably since 2009, 2010, that's about when I started seriously watching it. That's where I said, this is a track I want to go to. This is a track I want to see a race at. And, for years, I didn't get a chance to go. I went to Pocono, and Pocono was a good experience. But this race, the atmosphere, everything was just amazing. And the Watkins Glen staff, so great. And I can't thank them enough for the job they did this weekend. If anyone on the Watkins Glen staff is watching, thank you for an incredible race weekend, a memorable one, not to mention for my 25th birthday this weekend. I was very impressed. I had a blast, and same thing, and I also extend the same thing to the crew at Outlaw Speedway in Dundee, New York. They did an excellent job this weekend as well. It was fun. We met a bunch of drivers, and of course got to enjoy some great racing. So that's all I'm going to leave it off on. But with that, of course, actually beforehand, we will have a video coming out soon here on Tinkle Sports and Entertainment about the trip to Watkins Glen. It's going to be kind of a documentary, sort of, so you will want to see it. I can't tell you the date yet, but just follow us on social media. The links are in the description. We will have the update when it's available. The premiere date. But my overall thoughts, of course, keep in mind, I'm going to stick to Sunday about my overall thoughts. So Watkins Glen started at 3 o'clock. We got the green flag. The race ended about 5:15. I think 5:15 is when we got to the car. 5:30 is when we got to the car. And that's when the IndyCar race was starting. In hindsight, looking back, of course, I told you my thoughts on the IndyCar race at Nashville. And you know, based on watching this show, if you have for a while, that I'm a big critic of how NBC manages motorsports. And today is no different. For the viewers that are just tuning in, yes, I'm a big critic of how NBC manages motorsport content. I think Jack Krause put it nicely when he said, people on the West Coast, they will watch races if you start them at noon or 1 o'clock. Now, Michigan is starting at 1 next weekend, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 2 o'clock, actually, but still, if you start a race at 1, 2 o'clock, it would have been pretty fine for the IndyCar. Seeing what happened at IndyCar at Nashville, it probably would have worked out. That said as well, from the standpoint of that, Nashville could have started at 4:30. Why do you start a race in the central time zone at 5, 6 o'clock at night at a track that doesn't have lights and then run 80 laps at that track? That's what's bothering me, and that's also on the track promoters and IndyCar itself, as much as it is on NBC and NBCSN. But the other thing is, what if that NASCAR race was anything remotely close to the Xfinity race, where we had some late cautions, kind of reset the field? Not to mention if we had one of those wild Watkins Glen races that many are used to. What would have happened if we had that? Would they have delayed the start of the IndyCar race to finish up the NASCAR one? Would they have moved the race to CNBC or started it on Peacock? Those are all big questions that I think deserve a little bit, or I don't think they deserve an answer. They're more rhetorical, but needless to say, Watkins Glen could have easily started at 1 o'clock. You could have started pre-race at 12:30. I get there's Olympic coverage, but you know what? It's all repeats at this point. By the time you wake up in the morning, you already knew the results of gymnastics, of track and field, of skeet shooting. You knew the results by then. You're telling me you couldn't put these on Peacock at 1 o'clock and said, we got to go to the NASCAR race? Because you're investing a lot of money into NASCAR just like you are for the Olympics. And let's be fair, by then everyone's probably watched the closing ceremonies with Johnny Weir on NBC. They could have started the race then. Now, I was in the infield for the first part. I wasn't allowed in the pits, by the way. But when I was in the infield at 10:30, 11 o'clock. Now, we got to the track at 8:30 in the morning. 8:30 was probably about 10-15% of the fans that probably bought tickets. Now, keep in mind, it's a sold-out event. All the seats were supposedly filled. Let's see. So then around 11 o'clock, 11:30, probably about 70-75%. Around noon, 1 o'clock, I would say, I think it's fair to say about 80-90% of who was there to watch the race that bought grandstand tickets. Now, this doesn't include the campers that were on site all weekend. I would say about 80-90% of the grandstands were there. Not to mention, you had a threat of thunderstorms later in the afternoon, which is a custom in New York. when we have these 90 degree, super humid, super hot days. Now, I've lived in New York my whole life. When we have these kinds of days in the southern tier, not New York City, but the southern tier, the Finger Lakes region, these storms brew out of nowhere sometimes. And they are heavy cells. Now, again, we could have raced through the rain, but they bring lightning with them as well. And looking back at COTA, I mean, they bring heavy rain, but unlike COTA, they let up after about 20 minutes sometimes. Other times they grow in size. But again, there's reason to believe that you could have gotten the whole race in, obviously. And then on top of it, because NBC also, I think NBC has more say in when this race starts than the series itself. But whoever is the one deciding to do races at 3:30, it's not working out for you. You're losing viewership, and not to mention, you're hurting other series. You hurt IndyCar yet again with this decision. IndyCar started at 5:30. You could have started IndyCar, if you moved up NASCAR, you could have started IndyCar at, say, 4:30. You could have dropped the green flag there. There was ways to avoid this with Nashville, and I'm more talking about what happened in Nashville than what happened at Watkins Glen. This is more directed at IndyCar, and again, they're getting treated like the redheaded stepchild, which is why I'm so against this new deal with NBC and Peacock. So I just hope with the new deal they're treated a little better, and I wish that NBC would stop looking at this. Again, there's no Sunday Night Football right now, but the reason is that these races are so late is they want a precursor to Sunday Night Football. They want something to build the excitement. They want something to lead up to it. And I hate to break it to you, but the football fans aren't watching NASCAR on Sunday afternoon. They don't give a shit what's going on in NASCAR or IndyCar at that point. They care what's going on the field, because chances are their team's playing, or they got bets, or they got fantasy football riding on this. So they don't care what's going on in NASCAR. They'll look at it on Facebook later. Maybe they DVR it. That'll help with your ratings, but chances are they're looking somewhere else for that news. But with that, let's make our picks. We're at 28 minutes here. It's 5:28 right now. So IndyCar, I'm picking Romain Grosjean for the IndyCar doubleheader at Indianapolis with the Cup Series. Romain was really good in the first one. He should have won the first one. Got passed late by Rinus VeeKay, who went on to win. I think Romain gets the job done. And you know what? It's going to boost his resume because he's on the market right now. Austin Sindrick, he's my pick for the NASCAR Xfinity race. He's also going to make his final Cup start this weekend, but he's not my pick there. But Austin Sindrick, he's a great road racer. I think he's got a shot at it, and I think he wants redemption after that battle with Chase Briscoe last season. So that's my pick there. Then for the NASCAR Cup Series, I'm going to pick Chase Elliott. I can't see him losing at a track like this, and if he does, it's going to be at the hands of Christopher Bell or possibly Martin Truex Jr. I think those two have a good shot at it. I wouldn't even rule out Matt DiBenedetto at this point for the win, because Matt DiBenedetto, keep in mind, he was the first one that really tested on the Indianapolis road course, so he knows his way around it. I think he would definitely put up a fight there for the win. That said, we want to thank you for watching. I'm sorry we didn't have any silly season content today. We might have a special coming up soon where I'm going to predict the open rides for next year. Stay tuned. It'll probably happen next week. Not at this time on this show, but it'll be a separate show. And of course, hopefully you guys enjoy this upcoming race weekend, and we'll be back next Tuesday with another edition of Tinkle I'm sorry, out of turn 4 on Tinkle Sports. So until then, guys, goodbye, everyone.